Hi, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk to you about plant care. Many of the questions that we get asked at the flower shop: how do I take care of my plant? And what kind of light does it need? When should it be repotted? All those questions, including how to prune your plant back, I'm going to briefly go over it today. Right here we have a pothos plant in a small 4-inch pot. A lot of times this is what we use to make up dish gardens like you see here. This doesn't technically have to be repotted right now, but I needed something to show you. So you see it's not totally root bound, but it will definitely grow faster if it's in a slightly larger pot. And just very slightly larger. You don't want to go up several sizes on a pot. Just keep it a little bit, maybe an inch or so bigger than the pot you're using, unless your plant is extremely overgrown and it needs something more. This is a potting soil mixture you can buy commercially, and I like to moisten it a little bit before I use it with some water, because otherwise it all comes out the drainage hole. After you repot it, you can keep it on a saucer to prevent more of that happening. Maybe that was a little too much. So you can loosen up. If this was really solidly packed root ball, you'd probably have to go up another size and loosen up all the roots. This is going to be fine. Pothos is a fairly indestructible plant. Once you set it in there, make sure you fill in all the little holes. You don't want any air getting in. You just want all potting soil nicely tamped down. Like if you're a gardener, the same way that you would plant your garden outside, you want to tap the soil down so it doesn't wash away in the rain, and you do it with your indoor plants so it doesn't all wash out when you're watering. Taking sure it's all. Now this plant is going to grow very fast and probably need repotting again in just a few short months. Another thing we tell people a lot when people want to know about watering their plants, the most common mistake I think is that people water too often but not with enough water. So only the surface of the plant is, and the soil is getting any water. You really need to water something so it pours out the bottom in your sink or something. And another way that we do it to make sure when something's really dry here at the shop, we soak water it. So this bucket's filled with water till about there. I'm going to hold it down, and I hold it there until it stops bubbling. Then we lift it up, and that drains a lot. You could do that in your sink, and when it's fully drained, you can put it aside. And you probably won't have to water a plant this size more than once a week. But there are different conditions that cause you to need to water a plant more or less. So when people ask how often to water a plant, I can't give you an exact answer because I don't know the conditions of your house. Do you have the heat up really, really high? It's winter time, the air is dry. You'll need to water your plant more often, and probably even mist it with a little bit of plain water to promote the humidity that plants like. But it's summertime and it's really humid. You don't have air conditioning, so the plant's not drying out. You're going to do it less. If you have air conditioning, it dries everything out. You're going to have to do it more. So most plants like to be evenly moist. And here's Jake coming to say hi. Hi, Jake. This is Jake, the shop dog. He said he wanted to be in the movie. He needs his treat. Excuse me 1 minute. There you go. I'd wash my hands, but he'll eat dirt. He doesn't care. Okay. So, the next thing is dish gardens. You've probably gotten a dish garden as a delivery before. They're popular for sympathy gifts, but also just for every day. And they need some care. They need to be cleaned up from time to time. Like this one has a little bit of dead foliage in there. And all plants are gonna have this. It doesn't matter how good of a plant care person you are. Leaves die, flowers go by, and if you can keep it cleaned up, it will promote the health of the plant, because some of these dead vegetation will attract insects, which is the last thing you want on your plant. You can trim off any brown spots. The other thing I want to say about dish gardens is it's a presentation of several plants in a container. It's really not meant to stay that way forever. A lot of times I get people bring in one that's all overgrown and crazy and we repot it, but you can do that at home by just lifting it out, and there's several plants. Separate a plant. Maybe just take one plant out and then there's plenty of room for the rest of the plants. Getting it out of that Spanish moss. So now these plants aren't as crowded, and I'll add some more dirt back in there. And then I would put this. This is more wet soil in this pot. If you don't like to get your manicure dirty, you can wear gloves, but I like to feel what I'm doing. These days we're wearing gloves enough as it is. So there you repot it. You would separate all these into pots about this size. Unless they're really overgrown, you could go a little bit bigger of a size. And then as they grow, you keep repotting them into bigger pots. Another thing I want to talk to you about, when you're repotting, if you have a pot like this, that doesn't have a hole on the bottom, you still need to come up with a way to give it some drainage. So I use these rocks. These are river rocks. They're kind of pretty, but I'm using them. They're cheap. You can get them at the dollar store for $1. Pop them in. Make sure you have a good inch or so, maybe more. If you're inclined to overwater your plants, give it even more drainage. You don't want your plants sitting in water. As much as I soaked this, I still took it out of the water and let it drain. And then you would take your plant, take it out of the pot, put a little soil in, just like I did the other ones, but you've added drainage because there's not a hole for the water to come out. It's a messy job. Now the last thing I want to show you, this monster. So this beauty is a China doll, and one of my favorite plants. It has a very lacy, pretty foliage, and it's very easy, but it's out of control, as you can see. So to trim it back, I want to see what shape I want. I want it to be kind of more confined. It's going to grow back anyway, but see if you can get a close up here, Dave. You want to cut it down to where it's branchy somewhere. You want to leave it a few branches. That's a big piece to cut off, I know. I might take some of these clippings and put them in water and see if I can root them. I could also use them as cut foliage and arrangements. But at home, if you do that, just trim it and see if maybe you can rescue the branches that you trim off. When you do that, you put it in just plain water, but don't put it right in the bright sunlight because it gets murky faster and you want to keep it from getting all kinds of bacteria. There's another big piece. It's so pretty. And then this one, just a little crazy. So I just have one more wild one here, but I'm thinking instead of cutting it, I might see if I can train it up the middle, holding it up with the other ones. You can also use a stake to hold plants up. If you like the wild look of this the way it was before, you could just use some green stakes to give it a little bit of support because the plant gets a little bit heavy. And if you tuck that green stake down the middle, it hardly shows, and then you can take a little bit of twine and tie it up, and that'll keep it from getting too crazy. The reason I didn't want it to get too much bigger is I was afraid it was going to start breaking. The branches get heavy and they break. I think that's all I have about plants today, but be sure to Google plant care sometimes when you don't know what to do. Like I get a lot of questions about things like African violets, which is another plant that people have trouble with, and that's a plant that likes to be watered from the bottom, so you put it in a little saucer with water and set the plant in it and let it drink it up that way. The tricky part about that is you can't tell from the top of the soil if it needs water, so I think people have trouble with African violets for that reason. And you're not supposed to get their fuzzy leaves wet because it kind of ruins them and they get rotten. So that's all I have on plants for today, and I'm going to come up with something else to talk about next time. Thanks for listening. Bye.